So there was a survey in 2024 and surveyed 4,500 UK adults. And in the survey, it said that the risk of burnout amongst the population is at 1 in 3, or 34% of the population are on the verge of burnout. That was 2024. And that 91% of people say they were always or often at extreme levels of stress. 91% of people said they were often or always at extreme levels of stress. An article from the BBC just got posted in December saying that loneliness among 16 to 29-year-olds was at 33%. 33% of 16 to 29-year-olds were reported that they felt lonely often. And that's higher than you might expect for the over 70s. It was only 17% in the over 70s. So the younger generations right now are really struggling with loneliness. Financial stress. Nearly half of UK adults say that financial pressures are currently affecting them negatively. What a great way to start the new year, isn't it? What a happy new year, everyone. We have entered into a joyful moment. But I want to begin today just with a little bit of context about the culture in which we all live in, are affected by, and are not somehow removed and immune from. But then into that, I want you to hear these words from Jesus, which I want to bring to us today. And they're from Matthew 11, 28 to 30. And this is the Message translation. You might have heard this before. Are you tired? You don't have to put your hands up, it's okay. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I want to suggest to you today there's something about the way that most of us are living and our culture is living that is simply just not working for most people. And I think in these words Jesus speaks, there's some things that we can really take on board that are going to help us to live differently. And when we think about like our culture in general and all these stats that I shared with you about loneliness and burnout and stress, it can be easy to point the finger at lots of different areas, can't it? It can be easy to go, well, the problem is this, the problem is that. But I suspect that's not really all that helpful for how we actually live as humans on a kind of week-to-week basis. We're suddenly not about to change the UK financial situation. We're not suddenly about to solve loneliness for all communities across our nation. We're not going to suddenly figure out how to harness all the good bits of technology without all the bad bits, at least not in the short term. But the church, which is really just the gathered people who follow Jesus, gets an opportunity to model something very different to our culture in this moment. Something otherworldly. We're supposed to be a community that operates differently to the culture around us. Distinctive. But let's be honest, often, for speaking for myself and for us as individuals, following Jesus sometimes can make us look exactly like everyone else, except we do something different on a Sunday morning. And the challenge I feel for us coming into 2026 this year is, are we prepared to press into Jesus to discover the truth and the life that are in these verses? That actually he wants us to step as a people into real rest. That recovery, or Eugene Peterson puts it, that unforced rhythms of grace. Isn't that a wonderful phrase? Unforced rhythms of grace. Perhaps if rather than copying and just doing exactly as everyone else does around us, we lived different lives that actually tapped into something of what Jesus was saying in these verses. Wouldn't that be more appealing to our friends and our colleagues and our families? Because somebody who walks in that kind of rest and that kind of peace, I think would really stand out in this day. But it would require us to live differently, to be more intentional about the things we do and not just go along with everything that happens around us. To think about the decisions we make, and as I want to focus in on today, is to think about how we use our time, how we use this gift of time that we've been given. To think intentionally about how we live. Because you can't simply bolt on the life of Jesus and expect it to do onto like a frenetic 21st century life and hope that it just makes everything right. You actually have to make changes to your life. Theologian Dallas Willard made this wise reflection, which I return to again and again. He says, if we want the life of Jesus, we need the lifestyle of Jesus. If we want the life of Jesus, we need the lifestyle of Jesus. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean you have to walk around in sandals all day. This isn't me fresh back from Morocco thinking we should all start wearing sandals and walk around in the dirt all day. But there's something in the way that Jesus lived that enabled him to tap into this life and this rest that he talks about here. He actually didn't just invite people to come to him and they would just be zapped and then changed. He actually said, come and follow me and walk with me and learn from me. And as we walk and learn, there's things you can adapt to your life. So maybe there's a thing or two we can learn from Jesus. But let's just look again at these verses in Matthew 11:28. Listen to these words. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I find these verses amazing because Jesus offers rest to the weary. And what I find amazing about this is that he doesn't scold them. He doesn't come along to people and say, can't believe you guys are exhausted and burnt out. You guys what's wrong with you? Why don't you get it? No. He comes with compassion and he comes alongside and he doesn't say, if only you tried a little bit harder, then you would get this life. That's not what he says here. He doesn't see the exhausted and the mentally unstable people and he doesn't pile more pressure on them. He actually comes along and says, come to me. There's no judgment. There's no getting told off for not living correctly. There's only grace. I have what you need. Come to me. We see the compassion and the mercy of God here. I have what you need. Come to me. The NIV says, I am gentle and humble in heart. That's a great phrase, isn't it? He's gentle and he's humble in heart. What a great picture of Jesus. Or the Message says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. That's a great phrase. His gentleness comes alongside those that are broken and weary and burnt out and exhausted and stressed. And how much do we all need that? Not grace, not judgment, but mercy. Not scolded, but instead gently invited to discover a different way of living. And not a way that creates more burdens, and not a way that doesn't fit your personality or doesn't fit the way that you're made up. Nothing ill-fitting. And I think this is the invitation I want to bring to us today and at the start of this year. Sign me up. Who doesn't want this? To live lighter and freer? Does that not sound good? Lighter and freer. And we live obviously in a culture where not just governments, but everyone's obsessed with efficiency and productivity. These are the kind of buzzwords that go around. Everything has to be more efficient, and we need to fit more things into the same amount of time and energy that we have. But I believe that most of the modern kind of productivity drive is exactly the heavy burden that Jesus is talking about here. It's putting onto people who are already weary and stressed and broken another weight and said, you just need to try a bit harder. If you tweak your lifestyle, if you get up at 5 a.m. every day and, go for a half marathon run, this is just my wife, and then have like the perfect breakfast, and you can kind of there's a whole thing called biohacking, isn't there, where it's like if you eat the right products and if you have the right fruit and the right exercise regime and all of the right things just in the right order, then you can be a superhuman. And it's kind of taking like the kind of athletes, we all know that athletes have to like train and they have to watch their diet, and it's trying to apply that to every individual life, and it's just exhausting. It's trying to squeeze more out of the 14,440 minutes that everyone has per day. It's trying to get more out of it. And there's, of course, nothing wrong with being efficient or healthy, obviously, but our culture often drives that in such a way that it just becomes pressure. Because down the path of more pressure is more burnout and more stress and more exhaustion and a life that is no more fulfilling. That feeling of never being good enough or never quite getting to the state that you really feel like you could be in if you optimized yourself to the maximum, that is an exhausting way to live. The Jesus path is a very different path. Free from pressure to perform, instead, come to me. Less striving and more abiding. Unforced rhythms of grace. And it's amazing because it's not forced, but it does require intention because there's rhythms. Rhythms require planning, they require thought, they don't just happen to you. You create rhythms. Rhythms are something that you actually decide you want in your life and then you build them in. They don't happen by accident. But it's not forced. It's not pressure. It's not try harder. It's very unlikely that you're going to get zapped by God today and wake up tomorrow in perfect peace and communion with him. It might happen. But I think the normal way in which God operates is he invites us into a lifestyle that carries his life. To arrange our lives and the patterns of our lives in such a way that over time we become the people that live freer and lighter. And that's exactly what the verses invite us to do. He says, walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. Jesus told the crowd, if you get close to me and you see all the things that I'm doing, you're going to learn a different way to live. And in that, you'll find life. So it requires us to look at Jesus' life. Dallas Willard, again, if we want the life of Jesus, we need the lifestyle of Jesus. So today, I just want to think through one thing for us to think through today. I'm not giving you lots of things to think through. Is how do you use your time? And I'm not going to give you specific applications because I firmly believe that it's got to be you-shaped. It's got to fit the person you are, the stage of life you are, because we've got people in this community from all stages of life. People, families with young kids, all the way through to people who are retired and everything in between. People in families, we've got single people, we've got people from all kind of backgrounds and cultures and languages and all of that. And so it's got to fit you in your unique circumstances. But the invitation off the back of today is to think through, how are you using your time? And the main point I simply have for most of us is slow down. Live a slower life. It might not feel all that relevant to you, but the more rushed and running around you are, and the more that's buzzing around in your head, the harder it is to live in this peace and this life that Jesus offers. There is a direct correlation with how manic your life is and your spiritual life. You can't rush around doing everything and trying to fill your calendar with everything and also live in the peace and love of Jesus. But that's not how our culture necessarily thinks. We see busyness as a badge of honor. Again, to quote Dallas Willard, he says this, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Easier said than done, right? And here's a bigger quote from Ronald Rolheiser, who Norman quoted just before Christmas. He's a theologian and author. It's a slightly longer quote, so just listen to these words. Today, a number of historical circumstances are blindly flowing together and accidentally conspiring to produce a climate within which it is difficult not just to think about God or to pray, but simply to have any interior depth whatsoever. We, for every kind of reason, good and bad, are distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Distracting myself into spiritual oblivion. It is not just that we have anything against God, depth, and spirit. We would like these. It's just that we're habitually too preoccupied to have any of these things show up on our radar screens. We're more busy than bad, more distracted than non-spiritual, and more interested in the movie theater, the sports stadium, and the shopping mall, and the fantasy life they produce in us than we are in church. Pathological busyness, distraction, and restlessness are major blocks today within our spiritual lives. He doesn't mince around, does he? And I think this is a challenging message because it's not the sort of message, and we've spoken about this in the past, it's not the sort of message you hear once and then it's like, tick, job done. We need that constant reminder that there's a different pace of life that enables us to connect better with Jesus and not distract ourselves into spiritual oblivion. So how do you use your time? Because how you allocate your time is how you spend your life. How you allocate your time is how you spend your life. And you are being shaped and transformed by the rhythms that already exist in your life. And New Year, I always find, some people jump on the New Year's resolutions. I don't really tend to do those, but it is a good time to reset and reevaluate and review and think about the year that's gone and the year that's to come. It is still a helpful time to do that. And perhaps you want to sit down this week some point and just look at your calendar, look at the things you do, the rhythms, or just pay attention, just have a day of awareness. What do I do in an average day? Because most of us probably aren't always that aware. And are there things I want to change and shape about that will help me discover the life of Jesus? Now, there can be two extreme responses to this idea of reviewing your time, because we're all in different circumstances and seasons of life. And the first potential objection is simply, I can't change anything. I can't change anything. Now, of course, we all have things in our lives that we don't have control over. That's just the reality of being human, is there are things in your life that you have no control over. Perhaps you have commitments, you have jobs, you have people you care for or people you look out for, or perhaps you just feel like there's not much room around the edges. And there, of course, are seasons where we are just busy. There are times where we are just busy because there's a season and we just need to put our heads down and get through the season. But let me tell you, if the season is longer than a couple of months, it's not a season. If the season is longer than a couple of months, you're probably just telling yourself it's a season. And actually, it's not something that's sustainable. But even with all the constraints that our lives have, because we all have different constraints, I want to tell you that you probably have a lot more control over how you use your time than you might imagine. You're not a victim to your calendar, and you have ability to make changes. And the reality is the life you currently have is mostly made up by the choices that you have made in past years. You have more agency than you realize about the life that you're shaping, creating. Jobs can change, commitments can be shared or reduced. Your kids don't have to go to 16 after-school clubs to be healthy people. There's all sorts of pressures that get put on us by culture, things that we feel we should do or have to do in order to be fully functioning humans. And most of them are not true. They're pressures that other people put on us. Do we have anyone in here that would class themselves as a people pleaser? I can be guilty of being a people pleaser. Everyone's too shy to put their hands up. The problem that for most of people who are people pleasers is that we just find ourselves saying yes to things, don't we? Somebody comes up and says, could you do this? And you go, yes, I could do that. Or we need you to do this. And you go, yes, I could do that. But actually, no can be your best friend. If you struggle with people pleasing, learning to say no is actually a really healthy thing. To direct the life that because the only one that's responsible for your life is you, so to direct it in healthy directions. I have lots of examples of things I've said yes to and then later gone, why did I say yes to that? And it's just learning to have appropriate boundaries in your life. Because the thing you have to learn is that every yes is also a no. Every time you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. Whenever you look at your calendar and you see a free spot, whenever you fill it, you're saying yes to one thing and you're saying no to something else. That something else might be rest. It might be something else you could be doing. But every yes is a no, and every no is also a yes. That really helps me frame how I make decisions. When I say yes to something, I'm also saying no to something else. And I think this, like Ronald Rollheiser in that quote, comes back to this idea of all the competing pressures for our time and how that fits with our faith and church. And the very real challenge for us in our culture is that we are all so busy, and that finding time for church and Christian community is difficult. People's lives are so full. And sometimes the last thing people want to do is on a Sunday morning is to carve out a couple of hours to dedicate to being with the people of God. And of course, this is always one of those messages that this is not for the people in the room because you're here. But the importance of carving out time for Christian community, whether that's small groups or whether that's Sundays in worship, and we get it, I get paid to be here. You guys have to choose to be here by choice. And sometimes you don't feel like it. But again, it's that rhythm. The more a rhythm is in your life, the more it shapes you in a positive direction. Engaging with Christians in community is one of the primary ways I believe the life of God flows in and through us. We're not designed to be isolated. We're designed to be with others. And that's how we step into this life and this rest of God, is by sharing together in community, to share one another's burdens, as the Bible says. And in a world with 1,000 options, the hardest thing is to choose one thing. In a world that gives us, like you go to the supermarket and it's like 300 cereals or whatever it is, the hard thing is to pick the one thing in a sea of choice. So we have agency, we have choice. If we feel like we can't make changes, I promise you there are things you can do to step into the life of Jesus. And I don't want to be prescriptive about what that is for you, because it looks different for every person. The other extreme response you could hear from this message today is, great, let's cancel everything and go on holiday. Anyone feeling like that right now? Great, Neil says, slow down, great, let's go and sip pina coladas on the beach and enjoy the easy life. And often, actually, that desire to escape is because we're so stressed and burnt out and we're tired and we're weary. But Jesus says, don't go on holiday. That's not his answer. His answer is, come to me. His solution is not the culture's solution to rest. I firmly believe that, holidays are good. I believe in them. I believe in taking space. I've just been on one. I believe in these having these times. But the goal isn't that we exhaust ourselves, burn ourselves out, and then go on holiday and feel better, and then repeat pattern every so often. The goal is we learn to live sustainable lives where we're living in the rest and the life of Jesus all the time, whether we're on holiday, whether we're in the workplace. That's the goal. The goal is that we have a sustainable pace of our lives at Jesus' pace, not burn out, go on holiday, recover. Burn out, go on holiday, recover, which is how most of us operate. Have you ever been that way? I just need to get to the holiday. Just me? No. You just need to get to the holiday. And that's usually a sign that there's something gone wrong elsewhere in the way that I'm using my time and my energy. A holiday will not solve an unsustainable pace in your life. The goal that Jesus invites us into here is not escaping, but finding God's rest as we do the things he's called us to do. Jesus actually has good works in it, planned in advance for us to do. He has things for us to do. There is no such thing as retirement in the kingdom of God. I hate to break that to all you retirees, but there's always something God has for you to do. And that something might be to love your family and to build up your family. It's not all about work in the kind of way we think about work, but God always has something for you to be doing. And the goal is you do it from rest in his life as you go. And there's something about this kind of sense of inner rest that is the priority Jesus calls us here. Because when I reflect on Jesus' life, I actually think he's pretty busy. I don't know, being the Son of God, being the Messiah, seems like a pretty big job description. And when I watch and imagine him in my mind when I'm reading the Gospels, I'm like, this guy doesn't stop. But he does. He's got this massive mission from God to go and do all these things. But when you look at his life, he doesn't seem rushed. He doesn't seem panicked on the inside. He gets interrupted and he takes it in his stride. Things change and he adapts and he moves with it. People are demanding things from him and he says no. He moves around. He withdraws with the disciples. So it's not about escaping. It's learning to live in rest as you do the works God's called you to do. So I believe the kind of fundamental message today is that if we want our spiritual lives to discover that life and that freer and that lightness that Jesus offers, most of us have to slow down. There might be some of us that need to speed up, but I think in reality, in our culture, most of us need to slow down enough to discover the life of Jesus. As I say, Jesus was incredibly busy. But one of the patterns we can learn from in Jesus' life is he goes between solitude and the multitude. He goes from being with the crowd to being on his own. He takes the disciples and he takes them with them and he says, come with me, let's get some rest. In Luke 5:16 it says, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. I like to think of this almost like breathing. Now, one of the funny things in our culture is that often, I don't know if you've ever had this, you discover you don't breathe right. You ever had this where you're like, I breathe really, really shallowly. Anyone else had that? Like, you suddenly realize, like, it's not until you take a deep breath, you suddenly realize, oh, that feels good. Feels good to get some oxygen in there. And actually, we tend to go around life just with that kind of, we think, oh, I know how to breathe. I know how to do that. But we're actually breathing really shallow most of the time. And so we take deep breaths, and deep breaths regulates the body. It brings stress levels down, does all of that thing. And I just want to equate that almost to our spiritual lives as well. How is your breathing? Are you breathing in and breathing out? Or are you just breathing out and hoping it works? How deep are you breathing in the life of God? Because in the same way that our nervous systems are calmed by deep breaths, I believe there's a spiritual equivalent there. That we can step into the life of God when we're breathing in deeply of his life. How is your breathing? How is your breathing in 2026? Jesus has this pull and this push where he goes from being on his own to being with people. Is that balance okay in your life? I don't like to get pinned down theologically because I like to leave it open for change. But I often would describe myself as like a charismatic contemplative, which means like charismatic as in like I want to see the evidence of the Spirit at work in my life through the gifts of the Spirit and the power of God at work. But I also want to learn from the contemplative history of the church, which is the kind of more like the monks and the people who prayed and found God in solitude and found the ways you can commune with God when you're on your own. And I want to bring together the kind of the external, the power of God, with the presence of God in the contemplative, the inner world, the things we can learn from the great saints of the past. and bring those two together. And I think it's that breathing thing, the outward and the inward. So what do you need this year? It's going to be different for everyone. How's your breathing? What rhythms of grace do you need that are going to help you slow down, discover more of the life of Jesus? Because the reality is that all our strength, all our energy comes from God. And if we want to live for him in 2026, to see him work in and through our lives, then we need to not try and fill our calendars, but to fill our lives with the life of God. And I believe the invitation of Jesus to rest is not to come with me on a holiday. It's to discover a rhythm of rest in your everyday life. To have moments where you step out of the madness and it's you and God, and you're recharged and you're realigned and re-inspired, and he speaks to you and he leads you. Because let's be honest, Christians are not immune from burnout. They're not immune from stress. We're not immune from anything else that goes on in our world. But I believe as a community, we are supposed to model something different. A slower way of life, perhaps. A more intentional way of life. To be fruitful for God rather than to try and be efficient and productive. And fruitfulness, as Jesus points out, only comes from abiding, remaining in God. And I think the hard thing about this all, I'm going to pick up some of this maybe next week as well, but the hard thing, the reason it's hard for us to slow down is because at the heart of it, it's about trust. We busy ourselves because we feel the need to feel important. We feel the need to fill our time and achieve something. Or perhaps we feel the need to provide. If you're, it's not exclusively a male thing, but it can often be a male thing, this need to provide for a family. Like, I need to provide, so I need to work hard. And at the heart of all busyness and hurry and restlessness is actually a lack of trust. The hardest thing about Christianity is that we're not to do anything, we're to trust God. Like all of the effectiveness of our ministry and our love for God comes from trusting him, not from trying to make something happen. This is the whole lesson. I think we're going to spend some time in Exodus in a little while, that the Israelite has to learn in the wilderness. It's like, will they trust God for their provision, for him to lead them, for their future, so that they can step into the promises of God? I believe busyness is most often, and maybe I'm just speaking personally, a cover for some sort of insecurity that I have. Because when we slow down and we sit in a room on our own, we actually have to face ourselves and the things going on in our hearts and the things going on in our lives. I believe Jesus doesn't invite us to do more this year. I believe he invites us to trust him more, to lean on him and let him set the agenda for our year. And the antidote to all this busyness, I believe, is trust. Trusting God with your year. Trusting him that he will provide. And to trust him that you are enough if you did nothing for him this year. To trust him that he can achieve more in your life when you rest in him than he can when you try and do all your clever ideas. God can achieve more through you through abiding than through striving. And it's a hard lesson. Trusting him for provision, that actually we always feel like it's on us to provide everything that we need in our lives. But God doesn't see it like that. He's like, trust me. And I believe slowing down our lives is one way we show that we trust him. That we don't need to solve all the problems. And I'm going to finish with this verse from Matthew 6, because I think it brings together all these ideas of anxiety and trust and busyness. And it's on the Sermon on the Mount, and he says this in Matthew 6. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or stow away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about your clothes? See the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I don't know about you, but I want to walk in this lighter and freer life in 2026 that Jesus invites us into. And that's my invitation today, is just, will you take some time this week to ask the Lord, what do you invite me to change or reshape about the way my life looks, the way I use my time this week? So we're going to finish with a song now. Let's just take a moment, and I just invite you just to sit in this moment, and if the band want to come up, and we're just going to sit in this moment and just invite you just to either ask the Lord for the strength you need today. So just plug into his life and his likeness today. Just invite him to come and free you from the burdens and the stress you're feeling this morning. Or two, ask him, is there a rhythm I need to look at in my life? And again, he doesn't come with condemnation. He doesn't come with a heavy pressure. He comes with an invitation today. Come to me, all who are weary, burdened. So let's just take a moment. I'm just going to plug in for a song at the end here, but just take a moment this now, just with God, just to ask him if there's anything he wants to say to you.